The night it happened, I was standing at the hospital admissions desk, 7 months pregnant, watching a kind-faced woman behind the counter wait patiently while the room felt like it was slowly rotating beneath me. I needed to put down a $4,200 deposit to pre-register for my delivery. My hands had gone numb. I told the woman I needed a moment to call my husband. What I didn't tell her was that somewhere deep in the part of my mind that had quietly seen this coming, something was screaming. I was 29 years old, working part-time as a dental hygienist because my husband and I had agreed I would scale back during my 3rd trimester. We had a plan. We had savings. We had a joint account that my husband's sister had been added to. That last detail is where everything unravels. Let me go back to the beginning. My husband and I had been together 4 years before we married. His family was the kind of close that sounds beautiful from the outside and feels suffocating once you're inside it. His mother was the gravitational center of everything. His sister, 2 years older, unmarried, between jobs, living in the in-law suite attached to our home, moved in orbit around her. What his mother decided was correct. His sister carried out. What his sister wanted, his mother provided cover for. And my husband stood somewhere between all of it and called it loyalty to family. I had another word for it. I kept that word to myself for a long time. When we found out I was pregnant, the joy was real. We were both overwhelmed by it. My husband had to pull the car over on the way home from the doctor because he was crying too hard to see the road. I held his hand and thought, this is real. This is us. This is going to be something good. His mother's reaction was more layered. She hugged me, said the right things, made the right face. But within 2 weeks, she had begun weighing in on the nursery layout, the pediatrician, whether I would breastfeed, and whether it might be practical, given that I was home more now, for her and my sister-in-law to have a key to our house for easier access. I said we'd think about it. The following weekend, while I was at prenatal yoga, my husband gave them a key. I found out when I came home and walked into my own kitchen to find my sister-in-law reorganizing my cabinets with the cheerful confidence of someone doing me an enormous favor. She smiled and told me she was putting things somewhere more logical. I stood in the doorway with my yoga mat under my arm and thought about saying something. I thought about a great many things in that moment. Instead, I set the mat down, poured a glass of water, and asked where she had moved the glasses. That was October. By December, she had opinions about every piece of nursery furniture we ordered, a fixed habit of arriving Tuesday and Thursday mornings without any notice, and a running commentary that extended from my prenatal vitamins to the fact that I occasionally still ate deli meat. When I raised this with my husband, he told me she was just excited about the baby and that it was coming from a good place. I started keeping notes on my phone. Not because I knew I would need them, more because writing things down was the only way I could confirm to myself that I wasn't coming unhinged. In January, my husband's company restructured. He kept his job, but lost significant hours. We sat down together and reviewed our finances. We had roughly $14,000 in joint savings set aside specifically for the baby, the hospital deposit, the months of reduced income ahead, and any emergency buffer we might need. It felt solid. It felt like we had prepared well. His sister was in the living room during that conversation. I noticed she could hear us. I told myself it didn't matter. That was the mistake I will not stop thinking about. On the morning of February 3rd, I had a routine prenatal appointment and then went straight to the hospital to pre-register as my OB had been urging me to do for weeks. Pre-registration meant completing paperwork early, providing insurance details, and leaving a deposit that would be applied against whatever balance remained after the delivery was processed. I handed over my debit card. The woman at the desk ran it. She looked at her screen. She looked at me. She said it had come back declined. I assumed it was a banking error and asked her to try again. She did. The same result. She turned the screen so I could see the balance returned. The number was $47. 11 days earlier, that account had held over $14,000. I knew it was 11 days because I had checked the balance when we got our water bill and thought, we're in good shape, and then closed the app and made dinner. I excused myself, went into the hallway, sat down in one of the chairs bolted to the floor, and opened my banking app. I pulled up the transaction history. 14 transfers over 11 days, ranging from $400 to $2,300. Every single one initiated by the same authorized user. My sister-in-law's name was attached to all of them. I want to tell you that I immediately stood up and took decisive action. But the truth is, I sat there for about 6 minutes doing nothing except breathing, because my body had entered a kind of shock where my mind understood what it was seeing but refused to fully absorb it. The baby was moving. I kept thinking, not yet, not here, stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. I called my husband 4 times. He didn't answer. Then I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring and I said, "Mom, I need you to come to Mercy General right now." She heard something in my voice that stopped her from asking anything. She just said she was getting her keys. While I waited, I went back to the desk and told the woman quietly and as steadily as I could manage that there had been an unauthorized transfer from my account and I would be resolving it and returning to finish registration. She was kind. She gave me a direct number to call back when I was ready. My mother arrived in 19 minutes. I know because I watched the clock the entire time. She sat beside me and I showed her my phone, the transfers, my sister-in-law's name attached to every line. My mother is not a woman who performs emotion. She studied the screen for a long moment, then looked at me and said, "Where is she right now?" I said she was probably at my house. My mother said we were going to the bank first. At the bank, a branch manager named David listened carefully and was visibly uncomfortable with what I was describing. He confirmed that because my sister-in-law had been added as an authorized user, the transfers didn't meet the technical definition of fraud in the traditional sense. She had legitimate access to the account and had used it. Whether it constituted something else legally was a question for the fraud department and potentially law enforcement, and he strongly suggested I contact the police. I had her removed from the account on the spot and requested that all outgoing transfers be frozen pending review. Then my mother drove me home. My husband's car was in the driveway. So was his sister's. She was at the stove when I walked in, moving around my kitchen with the ease of someone who had long since stopped distinguishing between her space and mine. My husband looked up from his phone and started to explain that he had missed my calls because he'd been in a meeting. I placed my phone on the counter with the transaction history open and asked if either of them would like to explain what I was looking at. My sister-in-law turned from the stove. Something passed across her face. Not exactly guilt, more like a rapid recalculation. She said she had been holding the money for me. She said she and her mother had discussed it and decided it would be safer with her since I wasn't working full hours and they didn't want me spending it on something unnecessary. The room was completely silent. I said that she had taken $14,000 from my account because she had decided it wasn't safe with me. She corrected me. She said it was our account because Marcus was on it too. My husband said his own name, just his name, in a tone I still can't fully interpret, somewhere between a warning and a plea. I asked him directly whether he had known. He didn't answer quickly enough. That silence told me everything I needed to know. My mother, who had been standing in the doorway behind me, stepped forward into the kitchen. She looked at my husband, then at his sister, and said with absolute calm that they had until the following morning to return every dollar to that account. After that, she said, we would be filing a report. My sister-in-law looked at her as though she had wandered into the wrong scene in the wrong play. She said this was a family matter. My mother said yes, and her daughter was her family. She looked at my husband and said she hoped he understood what was happening there, that she really did. Then we left. My mother took me to her house. I slept in my childhood bedroom under the quilt my grandmother had made. In the dark, one hand on my stomach, I went back through every moment over the past several months where I had silenced my own instincts. Every Tuesday morning, I had said nothing. Every reorganized cabinet, every comment about my body and my choices. Every time I had looked at my husband and waited for him to draw a line and watched him choose not to. I opened the notes on my phone. There were 43 of them. The next morning, I found an attorney. Her name was Patricia, and she had the particular energy of someone who had heard every variation of this story and was still somehow both completely unsurprised and entirely in your corner. I told her everything. When I finished, she asked whether I had any written communication from my sister-in-law documenting her intentions with the money. I told her about the notes. She said to forward everything. While I was on the phone with her, my husband sent 11 texts. Reading them in sequence was like watching something disintegrate in slow motion. The first 3 were apologetic. He hadn't known the full scope. He thought it was temporary. He was sorry. The next 4 shifted into explanation. His sister had been financially struggling. His mother had asked him to make sure the money was protected. He hadn't anticipated that I would be upset. The final 4 were something else entirely, asking where I was, telling me I was being dramatic, telling me to come home and have an adult conversation. I forwarded all 11 to Patricia. She replied, "Perfect, thank you." 2 days later, I learned that my sister-in-law had not been holding the money. She had been spending it. Patricia's review of the banking records showed that $6,400 of the $14,000 had been moved into a personal account in my sister-in-law's name, and from there had gone toward what appeared to be a personal loan repayment and at least 2 credit card accounts. When Patricia shared this with me, I was sitting in my mother's living room with a cup of tea I hadn't touched. I read the email twice, set the phone face down on the cushion beside me, and said, "She spent it." My mother asked how much. I said more than half. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them and asked what Patricia recommended we do next. Patricia said to file a police report. We did that afternoon. The officer was direct about the legal complexity. Authorized user status created genuine ambiguity, but one piece of documentation shifted the picture considerably. In one of his earlier apologetic texts, the ones my husband had apparently forgotten he sent, he had forwarded me a message from his sister. Her exact words were, "I'm going to pull the baby money so she can't waste it." Patricia described what had occurred as misappropriation of funds obtained through deceptive intent. She delivered this assessment the way someone might describe a change in the weather. The report was filed on a Thursday. By Friday morning, my mother-in-law had called me 4 times. I let all 4 go to voicemail. In the messages, she moved through confusion, then wounded feelings, then anger, and finally arrived at a version of events in which I had been plotting the dismantling of her family all along and had simply chosen this moment to act on it. In her last message, she said I was using the baby as a weapon and that Marcus knew it. I saved all 4. My husband came to my mother's house on Saturday. He stood on the front porch looking tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not physically tired, but tired somewhere underneath. The kind of exhaustion that comes from finally allowing yourself to see something clearly that you spent a long time carefully avoiding. I stood in the doorway and did not invite him in. He said his sister had agreed to return the full amount in order to avoid criminal proceedings, and he said this as though he was bringing me good news. I asked him where the $6,400 she had already spent was coming from. He said his mother was covering it. I said his mother, who had approved the plan from the beginning, was now paying to repair the damage it caused. He said he knew how that sounded. I told him what I needed him to understand was that this was not only a financial matter. I had been standing at that hospital admissions desk at 31 weeks pregnant, and my card had come back with $47 on it. I had had to call my mother because he hadn't answered. I had sat in that hallway for 6 minutes, trying not to lose control while the baby moved inside me because I didn't want to frighten her. I stopped. I looked at him. I told him I needed him to make a decision, not for me, but for himself, about who he was inside our marriage, whether he was my partner or whether he was his mother's son first and my husband second, because I could not sustain both. I could not raise a child in a home where the answer to that question kept shifting based on who was standing in the room. He didn't give me an answer that day. He nodded and he left. and I went inside and sat with my mother and we watched a home renovation program and did not discuss any of it, because sometimes what you need most is to sit beside someone who is wholly on your side and watch strangers disagree about kitchen tile. The money was returned in full the following Tuesday, all $14,200, the balance restored plus the $6,400 covered by his mother. Patricia confirmed receipt and noted the restitution in the file. The police report remained open, and the detective indicated that with full restitution and no prior record, prosecution was unlikely unless I chose to pursue it. I kept the report open, not because I intended to push forward, but because I wanted my sister-in-law to live with the uncertainty of whether I might. She moved out of the in-law suite 2 weeks later. I don't know everything that was said between her and my husband because I wasn't present, and he gave me only a partial account. What I know is that when the last of her boxes were gone and my husband locked the interior door to the suite and brought me the key, he stood in the kitchen and said it should have been this way from the start, and that he was sorry it had taken him this long to make it right. I took the key. I didn't tell him it was okay, because it wasn't, but I said thank you. We are still together. I want to be honest that this is not a story with a neat ending. We are together and we are in counseling, both separately and as a couple. And some weeks, it feels as though we are genuinely constructing something more solid than what we had before. Other weeks, it feels as though we are two people moving carefully across a floor whose integrity we are no longer fully sure of. We have a daughter now. She is 8 weeks old, and she is the most remarkable thing I have ever witnessed. She has her father's ears and my mother's stubbornness and no awareness whatsoever of any of the turbulence that came before her. She doesn't need to know, not yet, perhaps never in full. What I know is this. The morning I sat in that hospital hallway staring at $47 in an account that was supposed to hold our security, something in me shifted permanently, not broke, shifted. The version of me who kept her voice low to preserve the peace, who moved her yoga mat aside without a word, who watched someone reorganize her kitchen and simply asked where the glasses had gone, that version quietly stepped back and closed a door behind her. I think about those 43 notes sometimes. I think about the fact that I had been recording things for months without fully admitting to myself what I was recording or why. I think I already knew. Somewhere beneath the hoping it would improve and the giving the benefit of the doubt and the reassurances that she meant well, I knew. If you are living in a house where you feel like a visitor in your own existence, where your perceptions are constantly reframed as oversensitivity, where the person who is supposed to choose you keeps finding reasons to choose differently depending on the audience, I want you to hear this clearly. Your 43 notes are evidence. Do not stop taking them.